Hello, everybody. It's Ethan here, and like many of you, I'm stuck at home. Schools are closing down, offices are closing down. Some people are working from home, some people are not working at all. Some people have to figure it out, like me. Whatever your case may be, the simple fact is a lot of people now have a lot more free time. What I've chosen to do in my free time is A, fill out some job applications since I won't be back at school until August, and B, catch up on some old viewing. I've rewatched Mad Men. So far, I'm on season 2. I've gone back through some of my favorite Marvel movies, and like any good race fan, old races. Like last Sunday when there was no race at Atlanta, I pulled up an old Phoenix race and pretended like it was live. 1988. We all know who won that already because NASCAR puts the winners in the thumbnails of every video, completely ruining it for first-time viewers. That's not what this video is about. This video is about my 10 favorite races to watch and races that I hope you watch while you're under quarantine. And this video is in response to a video by The Iceberg, and that's the second time in a row I've done that, so please don't think I'm getting into a habit of this and just becoming a copycat channel, because I don't want y'all to think that. In fact, I encourage anybody out there to make videos of their 10 favorite races to watch during quarantine, or their 10 favorite baseball games, or football games, or movies, or anything like that. Wrestling matches, because a lot of people need something to kill the time right now, and a lot of people need some entertainment to take their mind off things. So without further ado, get yourself a nice cold bottle of social distancing and enjoy. Before I begin, though, I must say that most of these races, or at least a good majority of them, heavily involve my all-time 2 favorite drivers, Dale Earnhardt and Terry Labonte. Why are they my 2 favorite drivers of all time? Really for complete opposite reasons. One, and see if you can guess which is which, wins all the time and is super aggressive and will just move you out of the way and, intimidate you if he wants to, and that's a great way to go about winning, and he's a Carolina guy. The other is just straight out point the hell out of everybody. Second, third, fourth, every single pissing week till the cows come home, finishing in the top 5, top 10, consistently over a long period of time, winning every now and then, but always being up at the front and winning the points, because that's what used to matter. Wonder which one's which. Anyway, my top 10 favorite races to watch during this oh-so-troubling situation that we're dealing with. Number 10, the 2007 Coca-Cola 600. It's number 10 on the list because of all of the races on my list, it's probably the one with the least really exciting racing on it, but for me it's very sentimental. The 2006 Coca-Cola 600 was... Oh, I'm sorry, no, the 2006 fall race at Charlotte was my first Cup race, and then the following May I went to my first 600, 2007. And in this race, I just remember all the good memories of it. I didn't even really remember that much of the actual race itself. I just remember tailgating with my dad and his friends at work. I remember buying my first diecast. I remember how hot it was and how humid it was that day, but how I was excited to be at a 600-mile race. I remember sitting way up in the top row, like almost the very top row of that old backstretch section that's not there anymore. Just a lot of great memories. And then, on top of those great memories, just a really feel-good ending. Go look at the top. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing. I mean, I'm going to say who won, but I'm not going to spoil the rest of the top 5. If you go on Racing Reference, or if you just watch the race, and you see the top 5 that finished that race, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's not your typical top 5, I'll tell you that. But the winner was Casey Mears. The only win for Casey Mears, which is a shame because you think about all the history of the Mears gang and then how Casey only ever won one NASCAR race, but what a hell of a win it was. It was a bit of a fuel mileage win, a bit of a not the most dramatic. No, it doesn't have the most flair to it. But again, this race for me is on here purely for the sentimental reason. But I've gone back and watched it, and it's not a bad race. It's just a little bit uneventful at times, but holds a special place in my heart. The number 9 race on my list, and I hope you're writing these down somewhere, and I think, don't quote me on this, they might not be, but I think all of these are available on YouTube somewhere. Some of them might not have the best quality, some of them have really good quality, especially the ones on here that NASCAR itself has uploaded and will hopefully upload in the future. Like if there's one of these on here that I've watched in kind of little bit grainy 480p that if they brought it to full HD on the main channel, I would definitely go back and watch it again, just because it's that good of a race, but we'll get there. Number 9, from Atlanta Motor Speedway, the 1996 Napa 500, or as I like to call it, the Labonte's finest hour. What happens in this race? Bobby wins the race, Terry wins the championship. I don't even need to say much about the actual race itself. I just really love it for that reason. I always love seeing the Labontes do good in a race. I feel like Bobby Labonte is one of the more underrated drivers in NASCAR history. Nobody ever mentions him on their list of great champions, but I mean, he was a Busch champion and a Cup champion, and he was, part of the first group of brothers to be to both be champions. Kyle and Kurt would do that again later. But, so yeah, Bobby wins the race, Terry wins the championship. Just a great day for the brothers Labonte. Number 8, and if you don't have that much time, number 8 is the shortest one on this list, and that is the 1992 Winston. A lot of people, when they talk about the Winston, will immediately go to one of two races. This one or 1987. And I debated putting 1987 on the list, but when I've gone back and watched it, it's really a one-moment race. Like some wrestling pay-per-views just have that one match and the whole rest of the show is just like, that's how I kind of felt about the 87 Winston. Yeah, there were some great moments, and there was the interview after the race and everything. It was some great drama, but really, that race is all about the pass in the grass, which isn't a pass. But, so, when debating 87 or 92, I settled on 92. Just because of all the pomp and circumstance that went around it, one hot night, the finish, the whole battle between Earnhardt and Petty and Allison crashing across the finish line and still winning, and the whole 92 season that had led up to that for all those guys, and the fact that it was the first night race at a super speedway, and just, it set the tone for what the All-Star race would eventually become. It was the first super gimmicky, over-the-top kind of deal for the All-Star race, and I love that over-the-top kind of stuff. Like I said, I grew up going to Charlotte Motor Speedway back when Humpy Wheeler was, having the Wolindas do a tightrope across the track, or having the big truck-eating monster thing out there. There was always something. So I love gimmicks. Before the race. We start getting into stages and stuff like that, and I'm a little bit iffy, but gimmicks before the race, that's always fun. Who doesn't love a good pre-race show? So yeah, the 92 Winston, just because of all the pomp and circumstance around it, and because of that famous finish, and because of my boy Davey Allison. Number 7 on the list is one that broke my heart, and I'm not afraid to admit I actually, at 9 years old, cried at the end of this race after what happened. And that is the 2007 Daytona 500. A million hearts broke when Mark Martin looked like he was finally about to conquer the Daytona 500. The one of the two things that eluded him. Never won a championship, never won a Daytona 500. 2007 seemed like the time he was finally going to do it, and then Kevin Harvick. You cheeky bugger, Kevin Harvick. We all know what happens next. And that crash. I mean, who doesn't love seeing Clint Boyer finish the race on his roof? And 2007 for me, it was just such a, it was such a time, You're 9 years old. You don't have that much of a care in the world. Your favorite wrestler hasn't killed his family yet. Just a lot of great things happening in 2007 at that time. And it's just NASCAR '07, my favorite NASCAR video game, which is a controversial opinion because it's probably not objectively as good as 2004, but I love it for my own reasons. Just everything about 2007, that Coke 600 or from earlier, loved it. One of my favorite seasons in NASCAR. The introduction of the COT, which I thought was cool at the time, it turned out to not really be, but so yeah, I love that 2007 season, and it was kicked off with a hell of a 500. I mean, it finished at night. I can't remember why it finished at night, whether it was for a rain delay or something. I've not gone back and watched it, but obviously I will. It's on the list. So yeah, that finish, that heartbreaker of a finish. Personal anecdote. Back in that day, I used to watch. I would watch the race at home with my mom and dad, or at my grandpa's house with my grandma and grandpa. But after almost every single race, all of us would go to Pizza Hut and eat dinner after every race because they were still on early enough at that time. And I remember, and there was no Pizza Hut in our town, so it's like a 20-minute drive to the next town to go to that one. So that race ended, and for the entire drive from my house to my grandpa's house to Pizza Hut and halfway through to where the pizza came out to our table, I would not stop talking about how much I hated Kevin Harvick that day, how much I wanted Mark Martin to win. Really, it got to me, and I'm gonna go back and watch it and see if I feel those feelings again. Probably won't cry this time since I already know who won. Number 6 on the list is the 1997 Die Hard 500. 3 things about that. I needed another plate race on the list. Tara Labonte won, and there was one of the more famous and big ones of the time. And it was a really good race, but for those reasons especially, like I said, Labonte's. And if I'm not mistaken, who finished second? Little brother Bobby. So, number 5, and this is my only road course on the list, although I debated having another one, but it was between that and this, and I just had to settle on this. The 2012 Finger Lakes 355 at the Glen. And I wish they had catchier names for the Watkins Glen races. Like, the Budweiser at the Glen, which is what it used to be, but I guess they don't do that anymore. Marcus Ambrose, Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch. Basically, if you don't want to sit down and watch that whole race, you can get the same experience by watching the last couple of laps. And if you can, find the MRN call. ESPN did okay, but the MRN call of that finish, which you can find on its own as its own separate clip, is one of the. I love MRN. It's my main inspiration for wanting to become a broadcaster. This is one of their best calls of the last 20 years. And so, yeah, definitely go find that. If you don't want to watch the whole race, definitely watch the end and watch that call by MRN. Number 4, the 1994 First Union 400 from North Wilkesboro Motor Speedway. Another kind of a heartbreaker because I lived 45 minutes away from North Wilkesboro and it closed down 2 years before I was born for cup racing, so I've never gotten to go experience what that's like. And, well, I've been there recently and I've seen the state that it's in, and I've actually walked inside of there thanks to this nice old man that lives on the property, and it does not look good. I hope in the future that they can do it, but it's going to take a lot. Anyway, you can watch any North Wilkesboro race, but I picked this one because Tara Labonte won, and it broke a huge winless streak. It was his big first comeback win for Hendrick, his first win in the 5, and it was a good day because, he hadn't won for a long time, like Dale Jr., and when he had that really bad spell, 2009, 10, 11, and everybody is like, oh, Terry doesn't have it anymore, he's old, he's washed up, but then Hendrick took a chance, Kellogg's took a chance, it all came together, and, the rest is history, 10 more wins and 11 more wins and another championship for him when everybody had thought he was done. So it's a great story to see. If you don't want to watch that particular one, just substitute any North Wilkesboro race for that spot. But if you like the Lobanis like I do, that's the one that you want. The next two are a bit ironic since I just said how much I enjoy the Lobanis. Well, number 2 is. Number 3 is good. Number 2, maybe not so good. But I like Earnhardt, so it's a toss-up. Anyway, number 3, the 1995 Goodies 500. Because Dale Earnhardt and Terry Labonte got into it at the end. Dale crashes into Terry. Terry crashes across the finish line to still win the race. That famous picture of them in victory lane with the mangled up car that Eric Jones recreated at the Clash this year. Just a beautiful closing sequence, which is once again a race that if you don't want to watch the whole thing, you can skip to the end. But it actually is. I mean, it's Bristol in the 90s, so it's going to be a good race. You know that. But definitely go watch that. The next one, similar, but did not turn out so well for Labonte. And you probably have guessed it by now. The 1999 Goodies Headache Powder 500. I didn't really mean to turn him. I just meant to rattle his cage, though. And number 1, that's all I'll say about that 99 race. Great race. Both races. Definitely Bob Jenkins on his A game for ESPN. Love, favorite TV announcer ever. Anyway, speaking of Bob Jenkins, speaking of ESPN, speaking of the 90s, and to a lesser extent, speaking of what I said about the Earnhardts and Lobanis, is my number 1 race on this list. The list that I think empirically, without a doubt, 100% beyond any argument, is the number 1 best race in the history of NASCAR. Don't at me, and if you do, you better have good reason. It is the 1992 Hooters 500 from Atlanta Motor Speedway. What can be said about this race that hasn't already been said? There's been documentaries made of it. There's been 20 years of chase and playoff gimmicks to try to recreate what was happening that day. It's just the best race ever. You had the championship battle, Alan Kulwicki, Davey Allison, and Bill Elliott. A couple other guys were, Kyle Petty and Mark Martin were also mathematically possible, but they were both long shots. And you had their battle for the championship that went all the way down to the end when Bill Elliott wins the race and Alan Kulwicki wins the championship. The little engine that could from up there in Wisconsin, who nobody thought would be a champion, who nobody thought that in this modern age of big sponsorships, a single car driver could win a championship, a single car team could win a championship, especially a driver-owned single car team. Kulwicki just goes in there and proves them wrong. He didn't win a lot that season. He was consistent, like I said earlier. And, you know, you had the heartbreaking circumstances for Davey Allison, and, well, you had heartbreaking circumstances within the next coming months for both Allison and Kulwicki. So it's really, I think it's one of the last races of a bygone era of NASCAR, because it's the end of Dale Earnhardt's worst season in his career. Also, on like the first or second lap of the race, Earnhardt gets in there and is being classic Earnhardt and kind of causes a wreck, but he doesn't care because he's Earnhardt. And the whole race was really good, even though Elliott won by 8 seconds. Kulwicki had the points. Bob Jenkins on the call was fantastic as usual. It was dramatic. It was the last race for Richard Petty, and it was his big send-off at the end, and his emotional drive around the track with his half-mangled car. It was Jeff Gordon's first race, the first race of, you know, one of the absolute legends of the sport. It was the last race of a legend of the sport and the first race for another legend of the sport. It was the last, I sound like I'm reading a novel here. It was the best of times, the worst of times. It was the end of Dale Earnhardt's worst season of his career, and he could finally get on to 93, which we all know was a hell of a lot better. And Alan Kulwicki wins the championship. What a storybook race. And there's nothing better. A lot of people will say 1979 Daytona 500 because of the historical significance and the finish and the fight. But I think that for my money, you can't beat the 1992 Hooters 500. So there you go. My top 10 races to watch under quarantine. Comment what yours are. Make your own video about what yours are. I'm going to send this to the Iceberg. Hopefully he sees it. Makes it sort of a call to action for everybody to make a video like this so we can spread the love of these races. Also, a couple honorable mentions. 2011 Homestead. That spring race at Darlington, the famous finish between Kurt Busch and Ricky Craven. Insert any Rockingham race from back in the day. The 2004 one, the last one, Casey Kane. And, oh shit, I forgot. Anyway, yeah, good races. Watch them if you can. Peace.